military member to hold the crown, because I feel like breaks stereotypes in pageants and military for women all across the globe. And I want people to know that you can do both, because I feel like sometimes there's this negative stereotype about women in the military. And I hope that they can see that you can on your uniform.
The 2-year-old was crowned Miss America as a second lieutenant in the U.S. Air Force and represented the state of Colorado. Marsh recently graduated from the Air Force Academy. She is now a master's student at Harvard. In the talent part of the pageant, Marsh spoke about getting her pilot's license at the age of 16. She said that as Miss America, she wants to raise awareness and raise funding for pancreatic cancer. It's a disease that took the life of her mother. Marsh started a nonprofit for this cause, and 51 contestants participated in the Miss America pageant. They represent all 50 U.S. states as well as D.C. And that is all we have for you this evening on the calendar. Paying Latin American countries $20 billion, removing sanctions from Venezuela, granting at least 10 million Hispanics living here the right to remain and work here. Is it characteristic for Mexico to take such a bold stance with the United States?
I think it's characteristic when you have a weak administration that's unwilling to do anything. You did not see AMLO do any of this during the Trump administration. And so when you know that the federal government, this administration in particular, is unwilling to do anything to protect the border, then I think that gives you the upper hand. And, to me, I kind of look at Mexico as a failed narco state at this point, and these are mafia tactics and cartel tactics to try to bribe or get the United States to bribe them to handle this. But the United States, the thing we have to remember is there's been no federal laws that have changed from the Trump administration.
Cutting-edge technologies to fuel its military buildup.
Among the witnesses was Matthew Pottinger, Deputy National Security Advisor during the Trump administration. He's now the China Program Chairman at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Speaking to the committee, he proposed to account to the military. Instead of targeting individual companies investing in China, the U.S. should apply new rules to the economy, since Chinese firms often dodge U.S. with their subsidiaries.
A simple set of rules that companies in the United States can comply with, I think, is help us get around progress on company-by-company enforcement.
When asked about which approach is more vital, Congressman Corey Mills told me that it's important to target both the entities and their sectors.
I think that it's really critical for us to look at why we shouldn't advance in things like hypersonic ballistic technologies with China that can utilize against us. But I also think that we should be targeting it on independent entities as well who are intentionally investing in these areas to strengthen our adversaries.
On a side note, lawmakers at Wednesday's hearing demonstrated that Republicans and Democrats can work together when it comes to issues involving communist China. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Sam Wong, NTD News. Today, the Biden administration announcing a major policy reversal. It is redesignated the Iran-backed, Yemen-based Houthis as a specially designated global terrorist group. This comes after a round of U.S. airstrikes on the Houthis for attacking international shipping in the Red Sea. The Trump administration had given the Houthis this designation back in 2021 and also listed the group as a foreign terrorist organization. However, the Biden administration did reverse both of those designations less than a month later. The Houthis' reclassification as a terrorist organization will go into effect on February 16th. We had a chance to speak with Gabriel Noronha, former special advisor for the Iran Action Group at the U.S. State Department, about the options the Biden administration should consider in dealing with the Houthis and the Iranian government that funds them. Gabriel Noronha, thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely, a pleasure to be here.
Gabriel, were the U.S. and the U.K. Measured airstrikes against the Houthi terrorists in Yemen last week successful in your opinion?
Well, no, they weren't, because the whole point of them was to get the Houthis to stop their attacks on international shipping in the Red Sea, and that hasn't happened. Now, I think the strikes were a good starting point, but they only hit about a quarter of the Houthis' infrastructure. Ultimately, this needs to be the start of a campaign to totally eliminate the Houthis' ballistic missiles, their radar sites, anything that they can use to hit shipping just needs to be taken out entirely at this point.
So, Gabriel, the Biden administration removed the Houthis as a foreign terrorist organization back in 2021, which was essentially not essentially, a reversal of the Trump administration's policy. How has that changed? Not only how the Houthis and terrorist groups like them.
So one of the first things that the Biden administration did is they said, we're going to try to bring peace and we're going to do it by pressure of Houthis and try to move forward. Success is on the way, but ultimately the Houthis, we now understand, used that gap in pressure to build their arsenal, build their capabilities, and just bide their time until they're ready to strike again. And so it's a huge miscalculation at this point that's forced them to reapply sanctions today is the plan, partially on the Houthis. They're not planning to reinstitute the foreign terrorist organization label, but they'll do a sort of minor version of it. The point of relieving the sanctions was to basically say you can do business with the Houthis. You can give them aid. You can talk to them. And that was, again, misguided, I think. And again, it's a reversal of their Middle East policy, just one of many that they've had to come full circle on in reverse ways.
Yeah, throw some money at it.
We know that Iran is funding the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah for that matter. Their goal at the end of the day is to destroy Israel. You've called for more aggressive sanctions against Iran. Why is that not on the table as of yet?
It really should be. Look, the Iranian government has been able to export $80 billion worth of oil extra from what it was under the Trump administration sanctions. That's unacceptable. We didn't get any return from the Iranians in exchange for that sanctions relief. So full sanctions on Iran's oil, its metals, its airlines need to be enforced immediately. But here, we also needed to apply kinetic pressure. Iran likes to use its proxies to do the dirty work for them, whether that's in Iraq, Lebanon, Gaza, or here in the Red Sea. And each time the United States grants it deniability and says, oh, these are the proxies doing that. Instead, what we need to do is say, no, we hold Iran directly responsible and be prepared to hit Iran's missile and weapons depots, or ultimately even their oil refinery and oil infrastructure.
Gabriel Naranjo, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Here we are to discuss all of the political ramifications and prognostications from Iowa and beyond. At the same time, even in the midst of our divided politics, we'll seek some common ground to keep our focus on what really matters to America: hope. Hope must prevail. Denise Grace Gitsom joins us now, and she is a political analyst. Interesting thing about Denise, she was born at Travis Air Force Base in Northern California to a Chinese mother and a Canadian father. She knows and loves America, and as the daughter of immigrants and a lover of God, her life is marked by gratitude and a commitment to public service. She has served in the Bush administration, and she has written a book about politics for people who hate politics like me. Denise, good to have you on this hour. Thank you for joining us.
It is so great to be with you. Thank you so much, Kelly. I love that intro.
There are so many
about politics.
Exactly. So, look, politically, what happened in Iowa was totally expected. Trump did not disappoint, and his base did not disappoint. They came out in the frigid, cold temperatures, -0 temperatures, to actually vote for the man they want to see back in the Oval Office.
Yeah.
What do you think motivated them?
Well, clearly there were no Californians out there like me, because none of us would have made it past the front door. Just a little too weak. And those are doozy for the former president. When you look at between, I only know that versus Trump, tried to DeSantis, and it was about out of 10 on average for Biden. A poll recently about that. And there was, I think, 8 out of 10 Trump supporters were a 10 out of 10. It was like gauging how excited people were. And that's the only thing that I can imagine that would compel somebody to go out in those sub-zero temperatures and show up for the person they really think is going to save America. And I think that's really what's at stake. That's what you're feeling in the electorate. Is it feels like an existential fight for many Americans, and it's the only thing that can explain it, I think.
You know, to that end, for those who feel that Trump is the answer to save America, there are those on the other side who are basically saying that Trump would not save America, but would hurt America. From that perspective, what do you say to the detractors who say, no, be careful, because Mr. Trump and MAGA Republicans may hurt this country, whereas they believe Joe Biden in some way will help this country, even though Joe Biden has poor approval ratings?
Well, you and I both know the only person that can save America, and it's neither a candidate. In fact, the government can never save us from anything. God saves us from everything, and he protects us. And so I think anytime we have an electorate that, however, that feels that way, that really feels like the onus of responsibility to protect our way of life, whether you're on the left or the right, it rests on a government and a leader. You start seeing the sort of the division that you're seeing in America is compelled and furthered because of that sense that if we don't do something and this person isn't in, then our way of life as we know it is over. I think it's a very dangerous perspective to have because A, it isn't true. That's not the real truth of our reality in America, but it's also, or for any country, honestly. But at the same time, it is how many people feel, and that's why I think this election is going to see just record-breaking turnout, at least on the right, because of what we've seen with Biden over the last 3.5 years, and how much Republicans are dying for a change in leadership, and many independents as well.
And is Donald Trump the one who can do it? I mean, you and I just talked about the fact that only one person can do that, and that's God himself. But nevertheless, we still have a government to run.
That's right. Well, clearly they're not looking for a fresh start because they're going back to a former president. And neither party had an appetite to change horses midstream in what feels like it's an ongoing battle of tug-of-war. And so I think what people want is the last best thing that they had. That's what I'm sensing. You know, all the words and the forward-thinking sort of younger generation talk that we have seen from DeSantis and Ramaswamy and from Nikki Haley, making the case for why we should have new forward-thinking leadership, has clearly been rejected by the voters. I think the voters feel like they want somebody who can restore order. We just don't feel safe as a nation. And so I think that chaos is something that people want to eliminate. And even though Trump is a chaotic president and has been a chaotic candidate, there's some kind of order that he promises to those voters that are supporting him that they want back.
Look, I'm talking to Denise Grace Kitson. She is a political analyst as well as an attorney and the author of a great book, Politics for People Who Hate Politics. So we're going to come back and really go a little bit deeper in what Americans are looking for at this particular time with this 2024 presidential campaign that's unfolded. Worked with the Bush administration. She knows a thing or two about politics as well. She's in law of studying politics. You worked with the Bush administration. Was it anything near the chaos and the chaotic activity that we see in today's time, bearing in mind that President George W. Bush had to wage against the acts of terrorism?
Just the fact that you asked the question the way you did, knowing what we endured in our first year in the White House when I was with President Bush, with 9/11 and all the challenges that came with that, it's funny. It almost feels like it was, maybe I'm just being nostalgic, but it feels like it was almost more orderly because the chaos came from outside rather than from within. And I feel like the chaos that we experience now as Americans is something that we're both perpetuating, but also that we're causing. A lot of the chaos you're seeing in Congress, for example, with the change in speaker leadership and the potential looming shutdown of the federal government. It's always, something that's being considered. It doesn't seem like anyone's really a grown-up in the room, and I think that's before, when I worked for President Bush, it felt like there was a sense of decorum and or civility that people could overcome their personal feelings about the president and how he got into office, after 2 Florida recounts and the Supreme Court deciding that he was president, and really say, let's unite, because when we had a common enemy, we were able to come together. You and I both saw, all the incredible things that were happening in places like New York City, where they were clapping for this president they never voted for. And yet we felt a love for one another. And I think that love, that sense of charity, that grace that we extend to people on other sides of the aisle has really eroded. And the division is at an all-time high.
To that end, how do we get through the malaise that we have inflicted upon ourselves as one nation divided rather than being united?
Well, as the Bible says, a house divided cannot stand. And of course, Abraham Lincoln repeated that when he was presiding over a civil war. And it's still true today. Those are eternal truths. And so as Americans, we really have to sit back and say, yes, I understand that we're going to go after what we believe in this election season. But our identity as Americans, and for me and you, both of us, and for many other Americans, as children of God, first and foremost, that are called to love one another, including our enemies, not just our neighbors, but our enemies, that has to transcend the divisions and the differences that we feel politically. If we're not able to get to a point in the very near future where we see our survival as being dependent on one another, loving each other well, or at least honoring and respecting each other, we are not going to have an America that we can stand behind. And all the blessings that my parents came from other countries to experience and give me a chance at life in here in America are not going to exist anymore, because we will have taken them away from ourselves.
You're the daughter of immigrants who came to this country because they believed in the American dream, and they believed in the hope that this dream provides and this country provides. To that end, immigration is a hot issue, as you know. We see what's happening on the southern border. We see how it's manifested itself and the trouble that it's caused in major cities like Chicago and New York City, how they're dealing with the immigrant issue now that it's being visited upon them, albeit through the governor of Texas and at one point even the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis. What do you say about the immigration issue? What has to be done? What should be done?
Immigration is such a broad term because it encompasses, and depending on who uses it, everyone has sort of a different definition of what matters to them in regards to the immigration issue. We have one issue of border security, which to me feels like a national security issue, much less so than an immigration policy issue. This is just a
in southern Johnson County in northeast Kansas is very close to Fort Leavenworth, the intellectual hub of the United States Army. It's close to Fort Riley in Kansas. It's close to Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, not to mention a major investment that's coming into Kansas with Panasonic involved in the supply chain. And as you know and your viewers know, companies like this are known for stealing research, intellectual property, and so a lot of concerns, despite the fact that they want to invest $100 million into Kansas and 100 new jobs. That all sounds great if you're not paying attention to the details. Beyond that, I've also called on the state of Kansas, both the administration and the legislature, to follow suit with other states to pass laws that give Kansas the tools to deal with these problems internally.
To your point, reports from the Daily Caller and also the Heritage Foundation are noting the Chinese Communist Party ties to this company, including that technology transfer is one of the company's 2023 investment plans. Now, on the point of the proximity to these military bases, what could the Chinese regime do with that kind of intel?
Well, it's incredibly concerning, and you've seen a pattern of behavior with China setting up companies buying land near our military installations. When I talk about Fort Leavenworth, for example, being the intellectual hub of the United States Army, the way we teach our officers, the research that goes into forming strategy is a very big deal and something that we need to protect. And so I have grave concerns about this company, and we are going to stay on this until something is done. We cannot allow, no matter how great it sounds with the investment in the new jobs, we have to stop China's infiltration of our country.
A new chapter for Russia and North Korea. A Kremlin spokesperson says Russia is developing relations with North Korea in all areas, including sensitive ones. Russian President Vladimir Putin also met with North Korea's foreign minister in Moscow Tuesday. She's there for talks with her Russian counterpart. The two are expected to arrange Putin's trip to North Korea. If it happens, it would mark Putin's first visit to the communist country since the year 2000. The U.S. has been concerned that North Korea could provide weapons to Russia to help its war effort in Ukraine. South Korean lawmakers say Russia helped Pyongyang launch a spy satellite last November. The escalating tensions have Washington and its allies on alert. Top nuclear envoys from Japan and South Korea met in Seoul on Wednesday. The two talked about North Korea's aggression and its deepening ties with Russia. According to state media, North Korea just tested a hypersonic missile with intermediate range last Sunday. It also launched a series of intercontinental ballistic missiles last year, at least one of them capable of hitting the United States. Military might is on display in the waters off South Korea. The United States, South Korea, and Japan are coming together for one of their largest ever naval exercises this week. A U.S. aircraft carrier is joining the event aimed at upping deterrence and counter tactics on North Korea. The country is nuclear armed and poses missile and submarine threats. Leader Kim Jong-un called to change the country's constitution Monday, abandoning the idea of peace with the South and labeling it an enemy. Senior diplomats from the U.S., South Korea, and Japan are slated to meet in Seoul to discuss the matter.